Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of On Air. Excited about this one. We're going to delve into sequences and cadences for outbound, and I'm joined today by Michael Hanson. Michael is the CEO and the founder of Growth Genie, somebody who spends much of his day looking at outbound sequences and outbound cadences. So I'm genuinely excited to delve in, get under the skin of what does a good sequence and cadence look like. But before we do that, hello Michael, how are you?
Yeah, doing well, Owen. Pleasure to be here. Thanks. Thanks
Good.
for
Thanks for joining us. So, is it okay if I call you Mikey?
Yeah, go for it. Just
I know I do outside of this, and I started really formally, so I might flip between the two.
I was just going to say, if anyone searches for me on LinkedIn, you have to put Michael, but my friends mostly call me Mikey, like Owen. So.
There you go. Oh, there you go. I'm classed as a friend. That's a really good start. Well, look, thank you so much for giving your time up and sharing your expertise, and that you are an expert in this, the knowledge and the experience you have around this. I know you spend a huge amount of your content and time focusing on this as the element of sales. So excited to get your take in it. Before we dive in though into the topic, let's get your 2 minutes. Who's Mikey and who are Growth Genie, so that our audience knows a little bit more about them?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you probably the quick backstory of where I started the company, and I'm sure you'll resonate with this a lot, Owen, is I think turning, a cold lead into like a warm sales opportunity, I think is one of the most difficult skills in sales or in business in general. And yeah, often we give it to someone who's recently graduated from college, has no experience. So I saw kind of a huge gap in the market in that enablement piece. So we're essentially outbound sales consultants, and we work with SDRs and full cycle salespeople who are generating their own meetings. One of the things we do is help them write sequences, which is why today's topic is relevant, and playbooks. And then there's also a big training and coaching element to it. So yeah, I think that was less than 2 minutes. So
nice, I love it. That was quick. With loads more time to give value back. So I like that. All right, let's get stuck into it because that's what we do. Cadence or sequence?
We normally call them cadences actually, but I think they're just synonyms, right? Cadence and sequence, they're the same thing.
Yeah, okay. I've always tend to call them sequences because I think people understand the word more often. It's a very tech SaaS thing to call it a cadence, isn't it? But a lot of our audience sits in there, so we'll probably flip between the two, and let's just, for the audience's sake, assume that if we say cadence, we mean sequence and vice versa. We'll probably refer to them as both. So let's get into it. So when you're writing a cadence, what are the things that you have to think about? What are the first considerations?
Yeah, so I think everything starts with your list. So essentially, what the big mistake I see people make is they make a general sequence. Never make a general sequence, because if you make a general sequence, you're basically doing a spray and pray approach. What you have to do, say you've got a list of maybe 1,000 people. Looking at 1,000 people, what different industries are you targeting, right? Maybe within that 1,000, there's 100 financial tech companies. There's like some fintech companies in there, and be like, okay, do we have case studies in fintech? Okay, we do, so we're going to focus on that. So that's one thing. Segregate your list by specific verticals or industries where you have case studies and you know you can talk that language. Another thing is by personas. So like, we were talking about this before. We sell to similar audiences, but if I'm speaking to a CEO versus a sales leader versus a marketing leader, I'm going to use different messaging for all of them. So those are the two most obvious ones. And then the last one is actually what we call trigger events, which often companies don't look into. So I know that if a company's hiring SDRs, they're probably a good fit for our services because they need help with the training and enablement of those. But again, we have a lot of software companies who integrate into certain software, so they can look at companies that use those softwares as well. So yeah, essentially it all starts with your list, and look for things that can help you segregate your list, because if you segregate your list properly, then the messaging is going to be more relevant essentially. So that would normally be my first step. I like
that because do you know what, it ties into so many other things, because I probably asked the wrong question there, which is asking about what it should look like, or what to consider. Actually, there's a step before that, which is understanding what are you trying to do and who you're trying to do it with before you can get into those sorts of things. Because I'm guessing understanding your verticals or your personas or your trigger events as a driver to drive the messaging through, or to dictate the messaging to a degree, also dictates what channels you're going to use as a part of that sequence as well, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because that's why I said that's the first thing, because essentially if you get that step wrong, everything afterwards is going to be bad, because it's not going to resonate with the type of customers you're preaching to.
Yeah.
And if you're targeting like a sales leader, but your messaging is about marketing leaders, then it's not going to resonate, right? So.
Yeah. So for the sake of the conversation, should we maybe pick an example, pick something that you've seen before that works well, so that because I think otherwise a lot of the answers will end up being could be this, could be that, could be that. Maybe if we keep coming back to an example, you said there sort of maybe fintechs, leaders within fintech. I don't know if you want to pick a persona within the fintech or something, but if we can maybe link things back to that might be really useful, so that we can give something tangible as well as the broader kind of these are your options. If we look at channels, and let's say we've defined out our list, we've got 100,000 whatever of a similar persona or industry, what's next? What are you thinking about?
Yeah, so you want to look at which channels you're going to use, right? So, for example, I think the main ones most people use nowadays are phone, email, and LinkedIn. LinkedIn's one of those. Most people are on LinkedIn nowadays, but you may have particular types of personas who don't use LinkedIn much, so it may not be that effective for them. So, do these people use LinkedIn? When it comes to calling as well, certain people answer the phone more than others. So we find that like a connect rate with a VP of sales is about 10%, so like 1 in 10. Whereas if you call a marketing leader, often it can be like 1 in 4, 1 in 5. So you may need to do more calls to reach them. And then you've got your emails. Typically, so we have a 30-touch cadence, which everyone thinks is crazy. They're always like, you can't have so many touches, that's harassing people. But I think we'll get more probably into like what's in those messages later. But we always lead with value, so it doesn't seem like harassment. But yeah, you're deciding how many touches on which channels. And in terms of our 30-touch cadence, there's about 7 to 8 emails. If they connect with you on LinkedIn, about 7 to 8 LinkedIn messages, then about 10 to 15 calls. And then there's logic behind that. So like I was mentioning, some connect rates there, which you'll be very familiar with. So you may need to call someone, 10 to 20 times for them to pick up once. And then I think that average open rate on an email is basically going down 1%. So I think it was like 25% 5 years ago, and now it's 20%. We're always aiming for like 40 or 50%. But essentially, a lot of the times, people won't respond or not open to email just because they're busy. It's not because they're not interested. So that's why we actually see most of our conversions, if they come on email, on like the first or second touch, or actually like the 6th or 7th touch. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just by way of reference to your 30-day thing, I was working with somebody who is a consulting client of mine a few weeks back and helping mentor one of their sales reps, and I showed them your cadence, for example. I know you love it, and I know that it's out there, so it's a good thing. It's spreading the word. And that was the initial reaction. Wow, the whole harassment thing, that's just not me. And you really have to spell it out to people that making 10 calls doesn't mean phoning them 10 times and having 10 conversations with them and bugging them. It's probably only speaking to them once. And when you start to break it down and realize that, like you said, open rates at 20, maybe 30%, connect rates at 10%, if you're lucky in some cases, you're not harassing. You're actually just doing the work that's necessary to get in front of people. It's a really interesting external perception on just how hard you have to work. And it shows why, in my opinion, so many reps aren't having enough conversations, because they're not following something through enough. Yeah,
exactly. And I think I also see it now from the buyer's end, because, buy software for Growth Genie. I used to do it at my last company as well. And I've had a few people recently of prospects, and they've actually replied. They had quite a good email cadence, so they did follow up. Maybe the 5th or 6th email I reply, send me some more information. If they were to call me, they would easily book a meet. They're trying to ask for a meeting via email, and then I've got to check my calendar and etc. Whereas if they had me on the phone, it would be so much easier. Yeah. So I see actually how effective the cadence is from a buyer perspective as well. Often I'm interested in something, and they raise awareness on email, because I always see email as a bit of an awareness channel. Yeah. And then you can convert on the phone, but they haven't put any phone steps in there. So.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we're very focused on phone first. It's our primary tool. Use all the tools available to you, but that's the one that there's no strategy without phone, in my opinion. And what's interesting there is that you have a tool for each part of the process. I think it's fair to say that some decision makers sit in a different mode on a different day. So today I might be better more receptive on a phone. Tomorrow it might be by email. The day after it might be that you catch me on a good day in LinkedIn, just because I'm hanging out there doing something else. How much do you see people in your sequence, in their sequences and cadences, when you're in with them, relying too much on one particular channel?
Yeah, happens all the time. I think, especially nowadays, like I was saying earlier, right? A lot of graduates, they're not used to calling, even like outside of business. So they didn't grow up where it was like normal to like, you know, call someone's house, parents pick up, and then you ask if you can speak to them or whatever. They just didn't grow up in that era of like phone calls. It was all like WhatsApp and messaging. So then they get into business and it's like, oh, get on the phone. It's like, well, I've never even like cold called my friends, let alone like a stranger, right? So yeah, I definitely see that, people hiding behind LinkedIn and email, and a lot of people actually do it well. And I've seen people, you know, just get, you know, you can get like 10, 15, 20 meetings a month off email and LinkedIn. But then I've also seen reps from like, you're smart, you've got good messaging, you've got great tone, you're very personable. If you pick up the phone, you can double that. And I've seen it happen a lot where, you know, people don't even know they're good at calling. And I had the same thing as well. I come from a marketing background and kind of got into sales. And one of my colleagues, Lawrence, he's, you know, older American guy, and he taught me the value of cold calling. And I started doing it, and I was like, well, it's so much quicker, right? If you pick up the phone, you can get information much quicker. So yeah, I see that all the time. People like hiding behind email and LinkedIn.
Yeah. Okay. So it's more like, from your experience with your clients, it's more likely to be the phone that people avoid than other channels, is it?
Yeah, I think pretty much now everyone's using email and everyone's using LinkedIn. And we even talk about that in our messaging as a pain point for our clients, which is that it's very difficult for your sales team to break through the noise on LinkedIn and email. Everyone's doing it. So if you're like a C-level or VP at an enterprise company, you're getting like hundreds of sales messages a week now on LinkedIn email. And that's the thing. People aren't getting those types of volumes on calls. Yeah. So just by picking up the phone, you can break through the noise much easier than like trying to email and LinkedIn.
Yeah. Now, you work with companies to build out cadences a lot, but I'm guessing you'll agree with the notion that it doesn't matter how good your cadence is, if your messaging is poor, you're not going to get anywhere in the first place. So how much weight is put on the cadence over other things that contribute to the strategy, data, list, messaging, training for the rep, those sorts of things?
Yeah, I think they're all really important. Of course, the messaging's absolutely key, but the messaging, again, is related to the list, like we were talking about earlier. And again, the cadence is that even if your messaging is incredible, if you're not getting in front of the right people on the right channels at the right time, then it's not going to work. And then, so we focus on email, for example. One of the things we do, and this is actually based on data by a company called Gong, is we use an interest call to action. So to give you an example of what I mean by that, most salespeople are always asking for time on a call, right? So, hey, we've got this amazing software. Do you have 20 minutes to see it on Friday? What we do is we say, would you be interested in something? And that something can be, we can talk about this later, that could be a piece of content, that could be a case study. And if you, let's take the fintech example, right? If we say, would you be interested in hearing how we helped another fintech help solve X problem? And if you find out those problems by interviewing, you know, your current customers who are fintechs, if they say yes to that, then it's actually quite easy to book a meeting. But essentially, the study says you get twice as many positive replies by asking for someone's interest rather than asking for their time. Because most people, when they don't know you, if it's cold outbound, they're not willing to give up their time, but they will say, hey, this is quite interesting. And once they've said it's quite interesting and they've replied, then you can book the meeting. So that's a little tactic that we use on cold emails.
Nice. And we're all about practical takeaways on this. So there's an absolute nugget for people that if you're, and I totally agree with this, if you're sending cold emails or LinkedIn messages saying, can I have 15 minutes of your time? Can I, my pet phrase is the wording around that. Can I grab 15 minutes? Kind of those sorts of things. It's a great way to put people off. So actually that's an alternative, because quite often we're very good at educating people on what not to do without giving them the solution. So there we go. It's, would you be interested in, and that might be a storytell, a case study, a bit of a bit of free content or a guide or something that adds value. At least that's what I'm taking from the way that you've put that.
Yeah, exactly. I can give you a few examples of just from selling Growth Genie as well. Like, rather than saying, hey, would you be interested in a demo about sales consulting, or do your 15 minutes to talk about sales consulting with 3 bits of content that we know are super valuable. So this is, if you're in sales or you're an SDR, speak to your marketing team and ask them what are our most popular bits of content that people are downloading all the time. And then you want to build interest in that. So normally our talk track is, hey, notice you're hiring SDRs. That's a trigger I talked about earlier. Would you be interested in seeing a playbook template you can use to onboard SDRs? They say, yeah, we send it to them. And then we started a conversation around something we can do. We can also say, hey, the 30 touch cadence, notice you're hiring SDRs. We find that SDRs often give up after a couple of touches, but it takes on average 10 touches. Would you be interested in seeing this cadence, right? So we're always trying to build value in a piece of content. It's related to our service, but we're not trying to sell a demo and, seem very busy.
Yeah, okay. And look, this is about, there's a lot of debate, isn't there, around adding value in the sales process and how people feel that you say you want to add value, really, that the sales is the end goal. Of course it is. But actually, if you can educate people along the way, then it doesn't matter if they buy from you, because they become recommenders and they become referrers and they become friends of the business and fans from the sidelines. So there's always a good reason to add value to people's learnings, regardless, and just from a brand perspective. So a really good idea. Let's get back to the cadence. So we've got our verticals, we've got our personas, we're starting to think about the channels.
Yeah.
What next? So you've got a 30 touch, and is it 30 days or is it run over a shorter period of time? I can't remember.
Yeah, it's 30 touches over about 30 days. But what happens, a lot of people think we're kind of harassing them every day. What we do, we leave 2 or 3 days in between. So we kind of give them a bit of space and give them time to, it's not too intense.
Yeah.
But what we do is multiple touches on any day. So for example, the first day is actually connect on LinkedIn, send an email, do a bit of research on LinkedIn, so that when you pick up the phone, you've actually got some nuggets you can talk about. And we're kind of repeating that process every 2 or 3 days.
Okay, fine. So we're integrating 2 or 3 channels in one go, like a mini sprint, so to speak, and then a bit of a rest. And then does the intensity stay stable? So every 2 or 3 days, or are there periods of higher frequency and lower frequency in that 30 days?
We keep the kind of intensity. So there's a lot of people I know that go very intense at the start and then kind of leave it a week and then kind of go intense at the end. I don't think there's any right way of doing it. We've had success with what we do. I've seen other people have success with different methods. But for me, all the channels are like interrelated, right? Because you may leave someone a voicemail. This is what I always say, a voicemail tip. Not trying to get them to call you back, but trying to create curiosity in something that you've sent them by email and say, hey, no need to call me back, but I've just sent you a piece of content that can help your SDRs, as I know you're hiring SDRs at the moment. You don't tell them what it is, because you want to leave that curiosity about, oh, what's in that email, right?
Yeah, interesting. Again, a little messaging nugget. And I think, I hear people leaving voicemails and asking for the callbacks a lot. I think, the percentage of people that actually call back, if you're doing cold outreach, is less than 2%, probably less than 1% in most. So you're wasting airspace on something that could be pushing them towards another channel. So that's really interesting. So we've got 2 or 3 steps, maybe 10 days of those 30. The other days we leave a gap and we leave a break. I'm assuming that ultimate 30 steps is fairly generic. So it's it's meant for somebody to pick it up and plug it in and then interpret and look at how they would use within their organization.
Yeah.
What would you do if you picked that up? What are the things for your sector particularly, or maybe the fintech example we're using? What are the first things you'd be looking to tweak and change? Is it more of a certain channel? Is it frequency change? What are the sorts of things you look at?
So I think it all comes down to the messaging. So this is what, when we're onboarding a client, we ask, okay, you want to target fintechs, maybe let's say CEOs of fintechs. Based on your current customers, what are the biggest challenges that they face that you take away from them, that you help solve? And that's what we really want to nail in the messaging. And that may be like, we need to go and interview our customers, because we may talk to, the companies we work with, and they say, well, actually, we don't know that in the level of depth we want. We also want it to be very specific. So something we find when we're looking at the emails of companies we're working with or the reps we work with, and the emails are very vague. It's like very fluffy language, like optimize and world beating, and like, no, we need specific things. So that can be like statistics or something quantifiable. That always really helps. And once we've got that information, then you're putting that into your messaging, because you're like, okay, these are the specific challenges that we're solving. And the other thing to bear in mind, like if you're doing outbound, top of the funnel, not closing, really the most important thing is that you're experts in the people that you're reaching out to and the challenges they solve on a daily basis. That's much more important than your product, because really it's like the bottom of the funnel when you're trying to talk a little bit more about the product, and even then it's still about problems. So really it's all about getting into the mind of the buyer that you're reaching out to.
Love that. And you know, there's 2 or 3 moments you've said things that just make a hell of a lot of sense around messaging today. So really grateful for that insight. Are you a fan of a breakup email?
It's all about definitions, right? You need a last touch email. I prefer to call it a let's be friends than a breakup email. And
you're one of those, yeah.
the reason is that basically you should never give up on a lead unless they're like, I hate you, unsubscribe, leave me alone. Because a lot of people in a cadence, they just won't get back to you, but they may be opening on your emails, maybe some kind of awareness. So essentially, like 2 to 3 months later, reach out to them again, because it often sales is a timing thing. So if you say it's a breakup, for me, it implies you're never going to contact them again, which I think is good. And then another actionable tip for breakup emails, our breakup emails actually ask for feedback. So it says, seems the messaging I'm using isn't resonating. I speak to fintechs all day long, so I'd love some feedback on my outreach so I can improve my messaging when speaking to other people. And naturally, actually, people like to be helpful, and they'll often give you feedback. And there's a few things that can happen. One is they ghost you, which is, it happens, right? 2 is that they actually provide feedback, which is great. You're getting feedback from your target audience. And 3 is they often like the humble approach, and they're like, oh, I've never seen a salesperson kind of use this approach, and they actually book a meeting with you. So that's a little tactic I really recommend. Yeah,
I can envisage that starts a conversation, and this is sales, right? It's about starting a conversation, because then you're into something that's 2-way rather than 1-way, and you never know what you can uncover and end up talking about. So that it's really interesting to see. So let's go back to our fintech example. We're building out our sequence. We're starting to think about regularity of contact. We're starting to think about channels. Let's say we don't have your 30-day, 30-step, or it's not right on this occasion. What would dictate how many steps you're going to use? Because 30 isn't right for every outreach program, it just isn't, right? It's no single number is right for everything, but it's a really good starting point if we don't know. What would make that 50 and what would make that 10 for you?
I think a lot of it depends about how much you have to say, right? Because if you're like a startup with a small marketing team, you may not have that much content or many case studies to put in your emails. So then it may be like a 4 or 5 touch sequence. If you've got loads, there's no reason not to have like multi-touch email thread. There's also, when we talk about lists earlier, you may have like a tier 1 list and a tier 2 list. So a tier 2 list may have more automated steps, right? So say you've got an 8-touch email cadence, maybe 7 of the touches are automated, and you just got 1 personalized email to start. If you're reaching out to enterprise, their email inboxes are much more cluttered. They get many more sales messages. So you may do more of a highly personalized approach where you're sending LinkedIn voice notes, you're sending videos, and you're doing more of a strategic approach. And maybe that's less touches, but like more value, higher value touches.
Yeah. What do you see from a rep perspective in terms of embracing voice notes, videos, those sorts of things, other than the older channels like email and phone? LinkedIn's obviously been adopted by everybody. Are you seeing people adopt video and voice notes with success and B, with enthusiasm, or are you still seeing reps perhaps not embracing that as much?
I think the videos are becoming more common now. LinkedIn voice notes, that's the #1 thing I would say to people to use for a few reasons. One is 80% of the time when I send someone a LinkedIn voice note, they said, wow, didn't even know you could send a LinkedIn voice note, right? So it's a good way of breaking through the noise. We see about 4 times the response rate for a LinkedIn voice note versus a written message. They're also very quick to do. One of the problems with videos I find is reps can be quite self-conscious. They don't like looking back at themselves. It's more time consuming, whereas actually you can send a LinkedIn voice note quicker than typing a message. So one, it helps you break through the noise, and 2, it actually helps you be really productive. Videos, just a quick one on video. Video is great, but what I see people do is like share screen on their software. Few tips I recommend for video: share screen on the person's website, the company's website you're reaching out to, on their LinkedIn, or a piece of content they're authored, and then again the video is about them rather than you.
Yeah, I like that. Do you think that I see this reps turning into children's TV presenters as soon as they get on video?
I love the analogy there. Yeah, I mean, we see them become like very robotic and scripted. The advice I give them is it's better that you sound human and authentic in yourself and have ums and ahs than there's no ums and ahs, but you just read off a script and you look like a robot. And even like, you know, today, I'm sure I've been umming and ahhing in this podcast, but I'm being myself. I'm like giving my authentic self. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. Maybe I'm missing a point there that people go one of two ways, because my experience is people, you're right, they either turn into that, I've got to be really comfortable and over rehearsed, in which case it's taken half a day to record a video that's not that engaging, or what I've seen a lot of is the over enthusiasm, is the again, either way, it's a lack of authenticity, isn't it? But it's the got to over present, and there's something about voice that's a lot calmer than video, that feels like it has to be a presentation and a performance. So we battled with that, where reps, they almost become human. They're like clowns. They turn into this big personality, and that's not them when they're talking to somebody on the phone. It's really, really interesting to see. So we talked a lot about the channels, the messaging. We've talked a bit about the sequencing and what might make it a bit longer, what might make it a bit shorter. What would you say to a company that's never written a sequence before? So, they haven't done this before. They've just gone gung-ho, do what you want when you feel like it's the right thing to do. What would be the benefits of actually having a cadence, having a pattern that you follow, and having a structure?
I think you just said the word there, it's structure, right? I mean, that's why you've got these companies, Outreach, Sales Loft, that have become, billion dollar companies, because they give SDRs or anyone doing outbound structure in their day, where I say, hey, today you need to make 100 calls, 50 emails, whatever it is. And it's all there. It gives people structure. So they're not just winging it and going on LinkedIn and like, oh, who am I going to contact today? So I think that's really the main thing. That's what a sequence or cadence does. It gives your team structure, so that on any given day, they kind of know what to do. And the reps love it as well. It's not like the reps think, oh, everything's getting tracked. They really like having that structure in their day. So I think, that word you mentioned there, structure, is the main thing.
Yeah, interesting. And how much tweaking would you do in a cadence? So if you've written one, you're going to use it for the first time. At what point do you start to think that step is working well, keep it, that step's not working so well, change it?
So we A/B test all of our subject line, or A/B test at least something in every email sequence. So you don't want to test more than one thing at once, because otherwise you don't know what the variable is. But either a subject line we'll test, and then say we see after 200 emails, one subject line's got 60% open rate and the other one's got 20, then we'll can the 20%. You may also test the call to action. If you're getting more responses on one call to action versus another, you would change it. And then you may, for example, use voice notes, right? Like I'm saying, we get 4 times the response rates, and our clients get 4 times the response rate for an audio note on LinkedIn than a written message. But then, we've only got a certain number of clients. So if you're doing those audio notes and you're not getting any responses at all, and they're taking a lot of time for your team, maybe your audience, maybe they don't like whatever reason. So you then go back to some kind of written message. So you just, everything's in like the data and the testing, like look at the numbers, look at your reply rates, look at your open rates, and see what's working and what's not working.
And as you get through a cadence, is there a point at which you see efficiencies drop? So after 20 steps or 30 days or whatever it might be, we really see outreach start to become ineffective, and conversion rates drop right down. Is there a trend around that sort of stuff?
So what we see, this is an interesting question, because what we see is either people will convert at the start of a sequence or at the end of the sequence. And a lot of reps will give up in the middle of the sequence because it's got to like email 4, email 5, or phone call 8 or 9, and they haven't converted, and they'll stop. And what we see is the high performing reps keep going to the end. And this is why we have the 30 touch sequence. And the reason is that you've basically got 2 types of leads when you're doing outbound. There's leads that know they have a problem. So they read your email about a problem. They're like, okay, I've got that problem. I'll take a meeting. They convert straight away. But then you've got others who basically need to be educated, and they need to go through awareness. So you're almost at the start of the sequence doing almost like a marketing type job of making them aware. It's only by the time they get to the end, to like call 10 or email 5 or 6, that they're ready to convert. So that's across pretty much all of our campaigns. That's what we see. will either convert at the start of the sequence or at the end of the sequence. So yeah, it's a long-winded answer, but essentially I'm saying the efficiency doesn't really drop. It's just sometimes the reps will give up because in the middle of the sequence, the numbers will go down, but then at the end, they'll go up.
That's really, but that in itself is an education for people. So it may be getting through that period where you don't expect it and you see that middle part as a brand and awareness exercise rather than a conversion exercise is a good mentality to take into it. And I'm guessing making sure you've got lots of people at each stage of the sequence then keeps that healthy rather than having everyone going through at the same timelines, in which case you end up with everyone in the middle and you potentially feel like you're missing targets and you've got to do something different.
Yeah.
All right, little bit of a challenge for you right at the end of this. If you had to drop a channel out of a sequence or a cadence and you couldn't use one channel, what would it be?
It's actually quite an easy question. Definitely email.
Really?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about email today, and email is great, but for me, it's more of like an awareness channel, so that when you pick up the phone or go on LinkedIn, they go, oh yeah, I got your email. But we find the conversion rates are really low on email versus LinkedIn or phone. So.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. And when it comes to messaging, is there any advice you give to people around? So the things I've taken are making it relevant and making it relevant around things like, you know, their vertical, their position, the challenges they're facing, the persona that they are. But also, I quite like that kind of would you be interested in versus the can I borrow 15 minutes of your time, those sorts of things. Is there anything else that you can add from a messaging perspective that you guys use all the time that maybe people wouldn't have seen or heard of?
Yeah, something I say to a lot of reps that we coach is, especially in those first few months or first 6 months when you're at a company, look for common denominators that when you're on a call, maybe you're like shadowing a demo of an AE or you're listening to customer stories, if you're hearing the same challenge over and over again from multiple different people within a vertical or a persona, that's what you want to talk about, because that's what's top of mind across these different people. So that's what I think, like I said, you're trying to get to know your customers really rather than your product. So if you hear different sets of customers all talking about one thing, that's what you want to be focusing on.
Love that. Absolutely love that. Last chance to add anything. Is there anything else that I've missed with my questioning that you think would be worth sharing?
No, I think just on that last point about the customers. So the story of the 30 touch cadence, this is like our most viral bit of content. It was a post that I did that went viral on LinkedIn. The reason I kind of knew in the back of my head that was going to go viral, because I've been selling to sales and marketing leaders for the past 6 years. And I did that post a year and a half ago. And in the time before that, we do this 30 touch cadence and I'd show it to people, and people's reaction was always kind of like shock, but like really interested and really curious. Yeah. So it was after speaking to so many people, I was like, okay, people love this and it gets their curiosity. And that's what I posted about it. So that's a kind of story of something I was talking about. Well, if you keep hearing the same reaction over and over, then you're, hey, this is what I need to focus on.
Yeah. Use your conversations to create content. And there's a really good message in there, which is that actually your best directional pointer in terms of what you need to be talking about is in the conversations that say no or that say not now. All of those sorts of things
exactly
lead into future thing. And I think that's where that collaboration between sales and marketing and collateral messaging and all those sorts of things become so critical. Mikey, thank you. I think it's been a really interesting discussion. I've got genuinely probably 8 to 10 real tangible pointers that I think people can take away from that, not to mention the things around that people will be able to associate with what they're doing now and challenges and questions to take away and go and look at their cadences and think about it. Really appreciate your time and your expertise and giving it up for us today. Thank you ever so much. If people want to get in touch with you and if they want to go and find your 30-day cadence, where should they go?
Yes, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I think that's how Owen and I first met each other. Michael Hanson on LinkedIn, Growth Genie, you'll find me. And my email is mhanson@growthgenie.co. Is .co, not .com. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the domain .com. So yeah, email or LinkedIn, probably the two best ways. And I know your cadence example is free to download from your website. And also I saw it on your LinkedIn profile this morning when I had a look at it as well. So people can go and get it and find it very easily. Yeah, exactly. And if you connect with me and just say, listen to the podcast, I would love your cadence, we'll send it over to you. Brilliant stuff. Mikey, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it. And speak to you again soon. Yeah, look forward to that. Cheers, Owen. Cheers.